So I've never really sat down and thought about my top 10 favorite games that I've ever played in a year. So making this list for me was very interesting and I had a ton of fun doing it. Let's just jump right into it. Number 10, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is the third installment in the Tomb Raider franchise since its reboot in 2013. This was one of the last games I played in 2018 and I'm glad that I squeezed it in. I think this game was overlooked this year given that its release date was just a week off Marvel's Spider-Man, and I'll admit it was definitely not at the top of my to-do list given that its early gameplay demos were a bit underwhelming in my opinion. However, this is one of my favorite franchises, so when the price dropped for the holidays, I had to pick it up. The game starts off a bit odd, but it gets its footing by the first hour mark. Some of the early interactions and dialogue are paced poorly, but correct themselves once you really get into the story, and there is one cutscene in particular between Lara and Jonah that I really enjoyed because it grounds their characters in this world that the reboots have created. This game is called Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and is rightfully so because stealth is heavily predominant compared to its two predecessors. A new action that Lara can do is cover herself in mud and hide along dark or vined walls to elude her enemies. In some areas you can sneak by without having to take down any guys, but it's way more satisfying to figure out how to take them all out without alerting the others. A fun addition to this game is that you can even craft different outfits, some of which have certain stealth perks. The reason this game made my top 10 list though is because there were some moments in the game that felt like nostalgic nods to the early PS1 games. One moment in particular comes early in a face-off between Lara and two attacking jaguars, which immediately reminded me of the encounter with the tiger in Tomb Raider 2, and even the tiger attacks in Tomb Raider Underworld. I'm really glad I fit this game in this year, and I look forward to seeing what else the series has in store for the future. Number 9, Minute. Minute is a game that can be beaten in about 20 minutes, but one that I would much rather spend hours exploring and discovering all it has to offer. The aesthetic brings me right back to my Game Boy days, which was a nice change of pace to the ever-increasing looks of realism in today's big-budget games. What makes Minute stand out to me is its inclusion of one gameplay element making it feel like a completely different genre. You get 60 seconds to explore, and then you die. That may sound arduous, but this game had me glued to the screen and on the edge of my seat for the entirety of my playthrough. I love the puzzle aspect of finding new items with moments left to live, and then thinking to myself, what the hell am I going to do with this? Interacting with the characters of this world is fun as you try and speed read through their dialogue to save those precious moments while still trying to figure out how to complete the task they give you. All in all, I had a blast playing Minute this year, and that is why it is on my top 10 list. Number 8, Forza Horizon 4. I don't have a ton of experience with racing games outside of beloved kart racers like Mario and Diddy Kong. In fact, the only real driving simulator I played was Gran Turismo 3 on PS2. However, last year I picked up Forza Horizon 3 thanks to a recommendation and spent countless hours with it. So when Forza Horizon 4 was announced, I knew I had to get my time in with it, and I was able to make this game the last game I played in 2018 since getting Game Pass. I'm so mad I didn't play this game earlier because in my opinion, it takes everything I loved about its previous game and expands on it a bit more. I love the inclusion of seasons as it takes paths you've traversed plenty of times and makes them feel anew with falling leaves or slippery snow. And the coolest thing is that the seasons shift with every real-time week, changing the scenery and adding new season-specific challenges. And like the season, new cars are added to the game each week, giving longtime players a reason to keep coming back. I can honestly say that this is one of the most beautiful-looking games to play, even as the scenery gets blurred as you're whizzing by it at 200 plus miles an hour. As always, the opening sequence of the game is enthralling, giving you a good feel for the game. What I love is that it doesn't matter what your experience level is coming into it, because as long as you know what's gas and what's brake, you can easily find yourself winning some of those early races. And what's nice is that the game will notice if you're winning too easily and ask you if you'd like to increase the AI difficulty, but that of which also increases your reward, so it pays off to get better. Perhaps one of my favorite things about this game is its soundtrack, with artists like Foo Fighters and MGMT, to Kendrick Lamar and Marshmello, all the way to Beethoven. They've got it all for whatever driving mood you're in. Now, I would love to spend more time talking about how much I love this game, but I also want to get back to playing it. So let's move on with the rest of my list. Number 7, Red Dead Redemption 2. Perhaps one of the most anticipated games of this year, Red Dead Redemption 2 takes us right back into the Wild West with Rockstar Games. What makes this game interesting to me from the start is the fact that it's a prequel. So we see these characters that we already know like Bill, Javier, Dutch, and John Marston. All the things we learned about them in the first game and what made them who they are We now get to play through that and unravel the mysteries ourselves through the eyes of a new character, Arthur Morgan. This game is so in-depth, and I'm sure that no two people who played through its entirety could tell you they had the same experience with it. Most of its characters are well developed, and the dialogue between them feels polished and real, whether the conversation be about drinks at a bar or stirring up heated emotions. Right through to the end, the story has many ups and downs as it takes you on a perilous journey of, well, redemption. This game is extremely detailed and gives you the freedom of doing just about anything you want, from gambling, going to the theater, and hunting for hours, right down to physically picking up items off a shelf in a store in order to purchase them. If you don't feel like mainlining the story, or if you're done with the story and just want to revisit the world, there are countless hours of side missions, small story arcs, and bounty hunts to keep you engaged. The ending to the main story was not as satisfying as I would have hoped, but nonetheless, it is a game worth spending the time playing because there are quite a few scenic moments within it that will forever be praised by me, and that is why it made my list for 2018. Number 6. Moss. I picked up a PlayStation VR set late this year, and I am so happy I decided to do that. Nothing stood out to me early in the VR cycle that made me say, I need to play that. But we're more than 2 years in now, and that's beginning to finally change. From the moment you start Moss, you're greeted with a peculiar medieval story from the perspective of small creatures. The game plays like a storybook, and in between chapters you are seemingly sitting inside of an enormous library, physically flipping through the pages of the story. You play as an overlooking character known as the Reader, and I will never forget the moment you are greeted by the main character, Quill. She feels your presence overlooking her, and knowing there is no communication to be had between you, she begins using sign language, hoping you'll notice. You can then look down into the lake and see your reflection in the water. I was hooked from the start, and I'm a sucker for 3D action platformers, and in this case, it's actual 3D. Equipped with a sword and evasion technique, it gave me the Zelda-like feel that I know and love, and makes you really think about attack styles as you progress through, encountering different foes. I wouldn't say story is anything we haven't seen before, but gameplay is what makes this a top 10 game for me this year. You are physically using your controllers in many different ways, like reaching out to grab and move a pillar while simultaneously using the joystick and buttons to help Quill traverse the environment. The ending closes this chapter nicely, but left me wanting more, which is good because this is just a part 1 to an extended story that I hope to see sooner than later. Number 5. Ni no Kuni 2: Revenant Kingdom. Going into 2018, this was one of the games I was looking most forward to playing. I have been a fan of Level 5 games since playing Rogue Galaxy and the Dark Cloud series, so after playing the first Ni no Kuni, I was hoping there'd be a sequel. I love the new story brought to this game, and even with the new cast of characters, there are a few nods back to the adventures of Oliver and Drippy. The vastness of this world is incredible as you fight your way through each territory to enter a new town. Every town is extremely unique and has a multitude of story and side missions to keep you coming back again and again. The new combat style of this game is one of the more notable differences, and I have to say they nailed it. I really enjoyed the combat in the first game and was worried when I saw all these higgledy things popping around the screen, but it turns out it just adds to the depth and fluidity of your combat abilities. Unfortunately, there is one thing I could have done without, and those are the skirmishes. I get what they were going for as you continue to increase your kingdom and army to protect that kingdom, but the skirmishes were very unsatisfying to me and almost seemed a bother to do. Speaking of kingdom building though, that is where they had me most hooked. Your hard work collecting currency and items and doing loads of side missions for townsfolk is rewarded by being able to build upon and expand your newly found kingdom and encourage craftsmen from afar to join you, bringing their own perks and abilities that become useful to your cause. It was also nice to include even more people to your party in this game, each having their own pros and cons to combat situations. It reminded me very much of the first Dark Cloud game. This was definitely a special game for me in 2018, and hopefully we see more great action RPGs from Level 5 games soon. Number 4. Astrobot Rescue Mission. I spoke earlier about being new to VR this year, and I feel almost spoiled to say that Astrobot was the first game I played on it. It took everything I love in simple action platformers and literally puts you into the game. From the first level of the first world, I was in awe at what seemed to be a perfect crossover between Mario, Ratchet & Clank, and Pixar. The controls were super straightforward, and it was so satisfying to not worry about flipping the camera around because all you needed to do was just turn your head and look wherever you wanted. Your patience and curious exploration is often rewarded as well, with a hidden chameleon or trapped astrobot. I love collectathon games like this, and even though I had plenty of rescued bots to continue opening new worlds, I found myself doing a level 2 or 3 times in a row until I fully completed it. A huge standout in this game are the boss fights, and damn are they an exemplary job of just how beautiful VR can be. These enormous boss enemies tower over you and your bot, making you actually feel minuscule in comparison. Throughout the game and in most boss fights, you physically use the PS4 controller as an in-game ability, whether it be tossing out blades or shooting out grapple lines, and it always felt smooth and rewarding. Astrobot is a great game, and the future of VR is looking bright. Number 3. Celeste. Celeste is perhaps the best 2D side-scrolling adventure game that I have ever played. Now that list of games isn't very long for me, but Celeste easily tops it. When I first played this game, I was coming off having just played through Undertale, which left me wanting something a bit more difficult and puzzle-solving oriented. Well, shit, did I come to the right place, because Celeste was relentless. I loved every aspect of gameplay right from the start. Sometimes I would be in a groove and continue through the next frame without stopping to take it in, and bam, dead. Then I would start again and actually figure out what I was going to do before taking the first leap. There were so many different obstacles to overcome, all with just a jump, propel forward, and grab technique. It rewarded in many places and punished you in others, and I couldn't get enough, basically playing through its entirety in 2 or 3 sittings. Not to mention, it follows an engaging story of self-doubt, denial, and mental illness. But with a quirky cast of characters that she meets along the way, our main heroine Madeline continuously treks up this physical and metaphorical mountain ahead of her. It is definitely a game that everybody should play. Number 2. Marvel's Spider-Man. I've always been a big fan of Insomniac games, so when I heard that they were making a Spider-Man game, I knew immediately that I had to play it. The mechanics of this game are so smooth, whether it be flawlessly swinging between buildings or flipping over enemies as you web them up. I mean, Ratchet & Clank introduced the swing shot back in 2002, so they basically already had swinging down, right? The combat is seemingly familiar to Batman's Arkham series, but with a much more acrobatic style to it, which is rightfully so, given that it's Spider-Man. Plus, his humorous anecdotes during combat or right in the face of danger always made me smile and give this game a real page-to-screen feel as if I were playing it straight from a comic book. Insomniac is great at making an arsenal of gadgets, and there is no lack of that here. As you continue to complete the numerous side missions throughout the city, you can unlock various upgrades and skills to improve your experience, and fighting crime on a regular basis never felt monotonous to me as I did everything to unlock every spider suit. Behind all the flashy unlockables, though, is a really well-told story of a seasoned Peter Parker who has been doing this for a few years now. We meet plenty of enemies, many of which may be familiar, but that never takes away from any of the surprises around the corner. The introduction of certain other characters has me excited for the future of this series, and I cannot wait to see where Insomniac takes this next. Number 1. God of War. This may be the most prime example of a tonal shift in the reboot of a series. The original games were button mashers that weren't very methodical as you progress through defeating a plethora of Greek gods, but this new God of War tells a much different story. Much like another great game on my list this year, this game is about climbing to the top of a mountain, but obviously there's so much more to it than that. God of War is about the bond between a father and his son as they go on a journey to fulfill their wife and mother's last request. Kratos, an unlikely candidate for family bonding time, spends the game teaching his son life lessons in order to survive in a harsh world that will not spare the weak. The direction for this game is incredible, and it's truly awe-inspiring that they were able to have you play through the game in a seemingly endless one-shot style camera. What solidified this game at number 1 for me was that there are so many memorable moments that make you not want to blink for a second for fear of missing out on anything. Moments like your first encounter with Boulder, seeing the world serpent for the first time, chopping off Mimir's head and hanging him from your hip, and working together with your son to take down an enormous dragon. Those are just a few, with plenty of others I don't want to spoil. The centralized hub world is easily traversable and holds so many secrets if you care to explore more in depth, which is almost always rewarding. An extra touch which makes all the difference to me is even when you are simply rowing the boat from one isle to another, Mimir will take the time to tell Atreus stories of the world, only stopping when you leave the boat and picking right back up where he left off when you return. It gives the game a more realistic feel than if 3 people were to sit silently with one another in a boat and only talk during cutscenes. Upgrading armor with Brock and Sindri is not only rewarding, but also hilarious as you listen to the banter between the 2 brothers. As far as combat, Kratos takes this outing equipped with an axe that, much like Thor's hammer, you can throw and recall. I cannot explain to you how immensely awesome it feels to peg an enemy with an axe, then punch and kick another, only to recall your axe and finish them off. The better you get at combat, the more enjoyable the game will be. This game holds a high standard for me, and that is why it is my number one game for 2018.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching and or listening. Just here to remind you that you can find us by searching for Circle Back Podcast or Circle Back Gaming on any of these podcast services: Anchor, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, or Stitcher. By God, I'm out of breath because of all these podcast services, but you can find us anywhere there. Also, you can find our video version on YouTube by searching Circle Back Podcast or Circle Back Gaming, and the rest of the videos we do. Thanks, guys.